when you think of a homeless person, who do you imagine? What do you believe are the root causes of family homelessness? And how will you address them if you're elected?
You know, when I think of a homeless person, I can think of a poster that I saw at a church, and this for me has been a walk of faith. It says, "How can we worship a homeless man on Sunday and forget about him on Monday?" And so when I think about the homeless, I think about who we all are, and circumstances that each of us have to deal with could leave us in a position of being amongst the least of thee. So when I think about the homeless, I think about those who have not had the opportunity, who in many ways have forgotten, and we shouldn't forget them. My word says, make sure that we take care of the least of thee. And so I think about the richness of the personality. I think about what they contribute and what they can contribute. I think about us extending a hand and making sure that their lives are improved and that they have the opportunities that they deserve to have. So when I think about the homeless, I think about all of us, and all of us, but for grace, would we go? And we have to make sure that we care for others the way we want to be cared for, and maintain that dignity. That is so important. So when I think about the homeless, I think about those, at least the one whom I worship, and think about the things that I have been allowed to do and the opportunities I've been allowed to have during the course of this journey. That's what I think about when I think about the homeless.
Given your experiences of working with the housing and homelessness field or community, how are you going to help the families that are homeless? Give us your best 2-minute pitch about how you would be able to revamp the city's approach to family homelessness.
You know, the city's approach is not what I think is a successful approach at all. We ought to be very tired of the city's approach. What is now taking place is inconsistencies. We have a large number of homeless. We have homeless men that are somewhere in the 12 to 15,000. We have homeless women in the 5,000 range, and we have homeless families in the 25 to 30,000 range. And we have not provided consistent services in many instances as we transition from homelessness to shelters, to in between homelessness and shelters. And then what we should be providing is truly affordable homes. We fail on that, and we should be tired of that. We have tier 2 housing where our children are living, no refrigerator, no stove, maybe one microwave, vouchers that don't work. You know, I'm thinking about what is taking place here and what works and so much does not work. And my assessment of this is that we need to, at one point, make a change and not have it be done by a press release. So my commitment is to take a look at the things I've been able to accomplish and look at the things that I have been able to lead in the midst of crisis. And my plan is, because I'm not someone who's gotten termed out, I'm not looking for a promotion. I haven't worked in any administration. I don't owe anybody anything other than the Almighty and my family, especially my 95-year-old mother. I have a plan with solutions that will take people from being homeless temporarily into shelters, and then finally into truly deeply affordable homes, so that we can live with dignity and have the appropriate services, and to make certain that we have taken care of those who are less fortunate, at least temporarily less fortunate. And let's make certain that we have the services to help those who are the formerly incarcerated, to help those who suffer from domestic abuse, to help those who are suffering from some kind of serial drug abuse, and to help those, which is an increasing number, who have and are suffering from emotional, mental stress. We need to make sure that we intervene today. We need to increase in the services that we provide with social workers. My plan when it comes to what takes place in the community is to have an emergency social services bureau. That is a 24-hour, 7-day bureau that sits within the shelters as well as involved in the community. So at some point we have to tire of this. I'm tired and I'm outraged at all
I'm sorry,
the press releases that haven't done anything.
The most common reason families go into shelter is domestic violence. Domestic violence survivors are given a quick deadline to leave the HRA emergency shelters, but they also face obstacles getting housing. You have to be in a DHS shelter to be referred to the homeless units and new affordable housing. Will you give DV survivors in HRA shelters the chance to live in those new homeless set aside units? And in the case that the abuser has left, what will you do to help DV survivors stay home and not enter the shelter in the first place?
So we need to intervene again. This is where the social services come into play. You know, my mother was a social worker growing up, and she sacrificed to make sure that my two brothers and me, along with my grandparents, could have a life. And at any point in time, we had to have a dozen foster children in our home. So I understand what it's like to be in a difficult situation. And when it comes to domestic violence, we need to make certain that we provide the services immediately. So the answer is yes, we should provide those services. And yes, we should keep them in the homes as long as we can. And we ought to put in whatever protective measures that we can find to the fullest extent of the law and to the fullest capability of the Emergency Social Services Bureau that I will set up to make certain that we protect these women, and especially the women and their children who suffer from domestic violence. And unfortunately, given where we are with COVID and the mental strains that many people are undergoing, that is likely to only increase. So we need to commit to having those services available, have them paid for, and having the opportunity for our domestic violence sufferers, the victims, to have dignity and to have homes and have shelters and take care of their families.
DV survivors often find that DV shelters are sited in low-income neighborhoods that struggle with crime, making survivors feel even less safe. Will you change this? And in general, how would you counter opposition from high-income and privileged neighborhoods to the siting of shelters?
You know, this comes down to how we build truly affordable houses and how we maintain in low-income areas and in high-income areas. How do we distribute housing more equitably? Because today it's been done inequitably. And I would make certain as I move forward in my housing plan and move forward in how we put people in different communities, that we did it more equitably. And one of the things that I've written before about is the inequities that exist in our educational system, in our housing system, in the economy, and in the criminal justice system. We have to be more equitable. And leadership means that we have to be more equitable, not in a way that persists and maintains what the press releases have said we would do, but in ways that change fundamentally so we can accommodate the world as it exists and those people who have suffered. So yes, I would commit to making certain that we have the services in place, that we have the appropriate housing in place.
Let me just interrupt and press you on this. So because right now there's just so much opposition to shelters in high income, often white neighborhoods, and also upzonings in those neighborhoods as well. How would you change the way that those basically, like, are there ways to ensure that shelters and housing are made available in neighborhoods where there's high opportunities?
The answer is yes. There's a great project now in the Bronx community to which we can look, where the rents go from $215 a month up to the most that you have to pay is $1,900 a month for a family of three or for a 3-bedroom. So there are ways that we can do this. There are ways that we can provide not only temporary shelter, and I'm not interested in warehousing, because often what takes place is that, you know, the stay goes from 9 months to 12 months to 13 to 14 months. And many of these conditions are deplorable conditions. So yes, I would take a very close look at how and where we build and make sure that was done more equitably. And since I'm not in anybody's pocket, I can go and do things that are in the best interest of all New Yorkers, especially the people who don't have a voice. So yes, I can go and negotiate and make certain that where we build is done more equitably than what it has been done historically.
Getting out of shelter and staying out. How will you ensure families that leave shelter stay housed? A lot of the city's supportive housing is set aside for single adults. do you believe that the city should incorporate supportive housing using a housing first model for families too?
The answer is we should support supportive housing. And the other thing that we need to do is to make certain that we have additional Section 8 vouchers from the federal government so that people can stay in their homes. And as far as that goes, we need to make certain also that we protect the vouchers and the holders from discrimination. And the vouchers have to actually mean something. They have to have the currency, and people need to accept that currency. And we need to enforce where we see discrimination. We need to take legal action to make sure that we denounce that discrimination, and so that people can stay in their homes. And today, unless we do that, the number of people who are suffering, who may be subjected to being evicted, is not something that we can't allow that to happen. I would not allow that to happen. That's not acceptable to me.
So, as you know, I used to live in a shelter, and I lived in a small room, and I went to 4 different shelters actually, but my last shelter I found out was $4,000 a month. To me, that cost is outrageous, just because that could pay for an apartment probably 2 months in advance. I thought it was honestly a waste of money, and the city could honestly have done better, So the question that we have here for you is, these days, it's popular to say we need housing, not shelter. But how exactly would you move away from shelter spending and make sure there is real housing for those most in need?
So my plan, in my economic comeback plan, in my infrastructure plan in specific, and part of that is building deeply affordable housing, which I would commit to. And I would commit to, just to give you a sense of what I mean, we could commit $1 billion, which we can afford, and I know how to fund it, and create 5,300 plus units of deeply affordable housing. And that deeply affordable housing, like what we see in the Bronx community that I've identified, that I've referenced, that rents go from the base $215 a month to a 3-bedroom for $1,995 a month. The $4,000 that you've just described is ludicrous. That's ludicrous. Just think about how much we're paying, that $4,000 a month, which we could which we could invest in building deeply affordable houses, so people have their dignity. And it may have been a nice place, but for $4,000 a month, that's like totally crazy. And we can't have that. I wouldn't have that. I'd restructure the whole thing, which is what we're going to have to do, which is why I'm going to have part of my Go Big plan, create 500,000 jobs, get people to work in building the homes that are necessary. We can no longer afford to do this. And furthermore, it's not right to do it this way. There's a much better way, which I've outlined. So deeply affordable housing, $1 billion, 5,300 units, lots of jobs, and $2 to $2.5 billion of economic activity. And we need to start today.
You said a lot about like the Bronx. Do you plan to only do things like that in the Bronx, or the other boroughs are up for grabs too? Probably not Staten Island, because who would want to move there? But like other than the Bronx, would you go to Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn? Because personally, I wouldn't want to live in the Bronx.
No, I indicated, I only mentioned that as a reference point of one example of something that's relatively new.
Okay.
Brand new. So that's just a model. I think we ought to do that in 5 boroughs. We need it in each borough.
Okay.
In each borough. This is the model that I'm looking to. And there may be others. I point to this one, I would take a look at it, because it's got a community center there. It's got a concert hall. It's got activities for children. It's got broadband, and people can live there with dignity. I want to have that and replicate it in all the boroughs, not just the Bronx, but in all the boroughs.
Okay, so Ray, with all of that and the way that you answered Katie's last question, this one has to do with the programs that are already in existence to help struggling families avoid eviction. And this includes the home-based and city for HEPS vouchers. But the voucher rules keep changing. Mm-hmm. And I've seen families displaced because their payments from city agencies didn't come through. And as a person with lived experience, that's occurring as we speak, even to me. So After the eviction moratorium ends, how will you prevent families with vouchers from getting displaced yet again? Just because the city is not paying its portion, how will you include landlords in the conversation once the moratorium ends?
So for one, I want to make certain that we can do whatever we can to extend the eviction moratorium. The other thing that we need to do is to make certain that the vouchers have currency, that they have the value that it states that they have. And we need to make sure that the landlords know that. And where we see instances where they're not taking the vouchers, we need to go in and enforce that they take the vouchers. And I'd be prepared to make sure that I did an assessment of where this was most, where there was more discrimination, the vouchers were not accepted. We also need to make sure that we got rental subsidies, right? So vouchers, rental subsidies, legal assistance to make certain that when any one of the tenants is discriminated against, that we bring the full effect of the law against the landlords who decide not to take the vouchers. And we got to pay the vouchers. We got to pay them on time. And part of this is a bureaucracy. So if the vouchers are not paid for on time, then the landlords get that more skeptical, whereas, more discrimination comes in. So we have to repair this, Ms. Rhonda. It shouldn't be the case you got a voucher and people don't accept the voucher because they don't think it's worth what the voucher says it's worth. We got to make it worth what it should be, what we say it's worth.
In 2019 to 2020, for the 5th year in a row, the number of students who were doubled up or living in shelters topped 100,000. That's about 1 in every 10 students in our public and charter schools. Students without secure housing have higher rates of absenteeism, and the pandemic has only made the problem worse. Many children still don't have Wi-Fi, and it's hard for parents to monitor their children while also trying to make ends meet. How are you going to make sure the homeless children don't fall through the cracks of the education system?
I'm outraged at this. The only way that I got here is through education, as I said from the outset, and my mother's sacrifices. Coming from the neighborhood and knowing what it's like for my mother to decide or debate whether or not she's going to pay the gas and utility bill, or whether or not she's going to pay rent, or whether or not she's going to put food on the table, put tithes and offering in the church. I get this, and education is so fundamental. And right now it's not working for our children. You were right. We got 1.5 million New Yorkers who don't have access to broadband or mobile. We need to fix that. And my plan is to have broadband. One of the highest priorities that I have in my infrastructure is to create broadband. There are requests for proposals out now, and we need to address that immediately, because we have now a year or two of our children being lost to COVID. We go from in classroom to out of classroom, and the assumption is that people can immediately access tablets and broadband, which is not the case. And so we need to come in. This is an emergency, and I've outlined a plan for how we repair that during the course of the summer. For one, where I think it's parents' choice, they can opt out, but I'd have school available, where I'd get retired teachers, I'd get current educators who wanted to, but I'd get a teacher's force to make sure that our kids didn't fall behind, and that we would repair what has taken place during the course of COVID, when our kids didn't have broadband and didn't have tablets. I sit on the board of the New York Public Library and wanted to make certain that our kids had access to Wi-Fi hotspots so they could go and do their homework. So I've been committed to this, and I'm going to double down on my commitment to this, because I'm outraged at what's taking place with our kids today. We're leaving our kids behind, and we can no longer afford to do that. We couldn't have afforded to do it, and now we certainly cannot afford to do it. And I found it outrageous that we're allowing this to occur. And there's no outrage. There's no outrage. I am outraged.
In 2016, they put DHS and HRAs together into one system, and Steve Banks was put in charge of it. How do you feel about the way DHS and HRA were combined, and what would you do differently as mayor to make these systems run successfully?
Given the current crisis that we have, it's not clear to me that the combination has resulted in anything that has benefited the people our New Yorkers who are in these precarious positions. We need to make sure we cut the bureaucracy. It should not, as I said before, take that long to honor a voucher. It shouldn't take long for the people who are making a difference for them to get paid. And the stories are 6 to 9 months, if not longer, for people to get compensated. And a lot of the not-for-profits and a lot of the social organizations, that is, again, reprehensible. So while it may have been well intended, the execution has failed. And we need to make sure that we get people in places, and leaders in place who can cut through the bureaucracy. I do not believe in having too much bureaucracy. You need to have some, but you need to have discipline, you need to have scorecards, and you need to have people who execute. Not people talk about executing, but people actually execute. So what I see there is a failure of execution because too many people have been left in the conditions that are at least as bad as they were when the two different agencies were combined, at least as bad as they were.
Would you keep the two combined?
I'd have to take a look at it. I'd have to study it a little bit more carefully to see what's the most efficient way to go about it. It clearly is not working today. You don't have the services, $4,000 a month. I mean, come on, if anything's working, somebody ought to be able to take a look at that to say if we actually built homes, truly affordable homes, that we could cut that down by at least half. We know that. We just have inept management. And it's not clear. Maybe you have absentee leadership, but it's not working.
So would you consider putting lived experience people in positions that could help those that are coming through the homeless services system?
The answer is, Ms. Rhonda Jackson, absolutely. I think we need to have the people who have experienced this, who have navigated their way through. I experienced the challenges of having no money, which allows me to understand what it's like to have no money. And then you go and get informed and you get a little bit more education and you understand the foundation, the place from which you've come. Absolutely. I want to have people have the lived experiences by my side. You know what? I know what I know, but I know what I don't know. And I know the people who know what I don't know. And I need to get them on my side. And I have a track record of having recruited and retained the best talent. And the best talent in these circumstances, the people who have the lived experiences. I want them at my side. I want you by my side. So we can call BS and so that we can change what has not happened over the years, and so that we can mutually and together express our frustration and our outrage and our disappointment and come up together with a solution on which we act immediately. Yes, I want lived experiences with me, in the room with me, by my side, advising me. That's what I want.
One of the things we've been talking about is how 95% of those homeless families right now are Black and Latina, and 69% are single mothers. Going back to this idea of root causes, what do you think needs to be addressed to address those disparities?
Well, the disparities start in education, don't they? They start two places. They start in education and they start in the economy. We need to get people jobs. People lost jobs today. And my plan is to create 500,000 jobs so we can get people back to work. We can neither cut nor tax our way out of this situation. We need to give people jobs. They can have dignity. I had a job growing up. We need to give our kids summer jobs. So one, it's the economics. The other is education. Right now, the system's broken. Pre-K is good, but by the time many of our kids get to pre-K, they're already behind. So we need to start early. Affordable childcare, care for the parents. And then I want to make certain for my account that by the end of the third grade, every child in New York City can read. Why is that? Between 0 and the end of the third grade, our children are learning to read. After that, they're reading to learn. Far too many, we don't teach to read by the end of the third grade. I want to ensure for my account that happens, and do math. And then beginning in the sixth grade, I want to expose them to different opportunities. They need to be digitally literate. They need to be financially literate. And then I need to expose them to the different opportunities. They can be welders or plumbers or software engineers or programmers or coders, but at least they have options. Get them a summer job starting in the 8th grade, a summer job so that they can experience the things to which they've been exposed. So by the time they graduate and do one of three things, they can either go to that career job for which they've been exposed and for which they've been trained. They go to a 2-year or 4-year college, but they have options. They got opportunities. We haven't given our children opportunities. 80% of the people in Rikers Island don't have a GED. And the ones who are 18 to 24, 1/3 of them read at the 5th grade level. That's what we need to fix. And for those people whom we haven't educated, we need to give them apprenticeships, vocational training. Let us give ourselves opportunities.